Ramsey, Yahoo, how are you dealing with some of these new complexities?
Well, some of the complexities aren't new for us. We've had, I think, 12 terabytes of data per day globally as we just passed 600 million users. So we've always had the struggle of how do you take a massive amount of data and turn it into something that's actionable, both from the targeting perspective, but how do you operationalize that to actually make the engine go? And how do you take that data and turn it into an insight? Oftentimes we forget that advertising is a storytelling experience, so how do you take the data and turn it into an insight? What we've seen over the last couple of years is an increasing complexity, both as buyers become smarter, as intermediaries become smarter. How do we take a platform which was historically closed and had all of the inputs defined from us and actually open it up in a way that allows our inputs to come in different ways? Agencies taking data from sites, from third parties, from publishers where they have the rights, and creating an insight, how do you enable them to actually buy? And I would say the DoubleClick Exchange and the Right Media Exchange are becoming the place where bid-based, audience-based buys can actually happen. I also think that we have to get the framework of the data rights established, because right now it is a wild west, and while people aren't doing things that are technically illegal, it's seizing up the system. Without a framework, people are saying, I'm simply going to get out. I'm opting out of this whole experience because I don't know, I don't control it. And the last thing I would say is that I think there's going to have to be some fundamental retooling at the publisher level where the way you staff against buys has to change. And I think John talked about efficiency wringing out of the system. I think in a world where publisher buys were historically content-based and based on publisher data, you had to staff a lot of people to go out and sell that. In a world where buyers have data and intermediaries have data, you actually have to change your sales strategy and focus on both the big idea where you can control content and create a big experience, but you also have to be able to enable those buyers who have data to be able to get to your system, to get to your inventory, and be able to buy it in a sort of a bid-based marketplace way.
What do you see in that new scenario as your biggest operational challenge? I mean, are you working on systems now that? Yeah.
So I think that the biggest operational challenge is a couple things. One is not having a legal framework. Every discussion ends up feeling like a first discussion, and it takes much longer than it should. Eventually, we'll get there. The operational issues are, again, how do you take a system that was built based on either content-based buying or publisher-side data and enable a buyer to use their data? Because to get to that point, you have to do things like sync cookies, which means that the intermediary or the buyer has to drop a cookie on your user, which means they have to drop a pixel on your user. And if you're a publisher who wants to control the latency on your site, you're going to have an ad server certification process. So I think that there are some industry things that the IAB and other organizations can do to help this process happen faster. And whether it's certification of a pixel server, I think the IAB terms and conditions are incredibly important in helping us move past this. And then eventually, I think there's going to have to be some retooling at a sales level, like the people that you staff against it, but also the systems that you use.
I think that's a big point. The idea that you're going to just sit back and say this isn't going to happen, it's just not reality. I think you have to play offense, because if you don't play offense, you're going to be left behind in this burgeoning kind of area of data. What do I mean by that? If you're typically selling a great content site and you're used to sponsorships, promotions, integrations, et cetera, that's great. Those are really valuable. And what you should do is play offense by saying, hey, you know what? We're going to build even bigger packages that include those great sponsorship opportunities, that include the great promotions, et cetera. But we're going to layer in maybe the ability for an advertiser to use their own data, maybe the ability for a buy-side platform to come in and actually buy an extended package on our extended network. One of those types of conversations. I think if you're not having those conversations now internally, you should be, because your sales team needs to be thinking about how they're going to react, how are they going to respond when that advertiser says, I'd like to buy my segment. I'd like to buy off of this data pool, off of this cookie pool. I'd like to buy this. How are you going to respond and say, yeah, you bet you can buy that. Here's how we can do that. We'll put this great package together for you that has all of these things. You need to take control of that, because if you don't take control of that, the market will control it for you, and you will be left with whatever it is left over at the end of the day once everybody else has already done that.
That's right, and if you just think about how far we are from that scenario today, where I guess that 70 or 80% of display media is still RFP'd. And RFPs mean sending faxes backwards and forwards between your sales team and between the media planners and the media buyers. And we're treating almost everything as if it is a content play, if it is a brand integration, whereas in reality, it's reach-based, or if you like, brand reach media, which we can start creating now with data overlays and verification and certification. We can make the web a whole bunch safer for our clients. That's a whole nother story, but we can bring those clients in, and we can automate a lot of that stuff. And if we can spend our time speaking, your time as publishers speaking to the media planners and coming up with great creative ideas rather than administering, then I think that's when we can start gaining the efficiencies and in fact doing a better job of making those brand integrations that much more creative and idea-based.
So another thing to think about, why does this matter? So think about search, right? Everybody in here has some interaction with search, whether you're a buyer or you have it on your site. Search is ultimately the reason Google has been very successful, and Adrian, check me on this. The reason Google has been very successful is not just because of the bidding infrastructure, not because of just the marketplace. It's because they gave the advertiser control of what they bought. The best determination of what an advertiser wants to buy is done by the advertiser, not by the seller. Think about that just as a fundamental concept. We don't have that concept in display media today. Advertisers really have very little control over what they buy and how they buy it. The search marketplace has been very successful because of that factor. If you think back to AltaVista days, when AltaVista first came out with their search product, it was all about buckets of keywords. Insurance, here's your basket of keywords, buy them, right? That didn't take off until Google said, forget it. Like, just buy whatever you want to buy. Bid on whatever you want to bid. The market, you guys can decide what you want to pay for it, and let's let it happen. That doesn't exist in display. Until we give buyers a little bit more skin in the game, the ability to start interacting more and buying what they want to buy, you're going to see essentially the market held back. Display is a huge market, and Randall knows these numbers probably better than anyone. You know, the display is 95% of all impressions, or some number like that. We need to get to something that enables people to have a more fundamental footing in what they're buying in the marketplace.
Bill, what do you think about that?
Well, I agree, but I think the level of complexity that still exists primarily because there's a lack of standards for the most part. So when you have those conversations and you reach the point where you actually have to facilitate or actually take action, we reach a problem, right? So that all of a sudden it's very difficult to get the buying community past a certain level, mostly because the direction from the senior management within many agencies and clients is no data usage or ownership. You know, the publishing partner, the ad network, whatever the case may be, simply cannot use that data for various reasons. And we find that the process flows nicely up until that point, and then you kind of have that conversation for the first time over and over and over and over and over again, and it's very difficult. So the lack of standards that we see today is something that I know the IAB is addressing, and we're very much involved in the T's and C's reinvention. And I think once that is set forth, we should see, hopefully, the process start to loosen up a bit.